This video is brought to you by me. Iceberg Tech is my new channel dedicated to gaming PCs, from custom builds to repurposed pre-builts to ultra-small form factor mini PCs. Check out the link below. If your PC game collection consists of hundreds of titles spanning a half-dozen digital storefronts, and you want to play them on your mobile device or your underpowered work or school laptop, Nvidia's Geforce Now might sound like just the answer you're looking for. The game streaming service, initially launched in beta form back in 2013, allows you to stream the games you already own to any compatible device without using local storage or processing power. You want to play the latest AAA game, but your PC doesn't meet the minimum requirements? So long as you have a stable internet connection, you can log on to Geforce Now and start playing at ultra quality, 1080p and 60 FPS. And with a few caveats, it's free. Sounds good, right? Well, hold on a moment. If you're asking yourself, how do the game publishers get to wet their beaks from this? You're not alone. Shortly after Geforce Now left beta, publishers lined up to politely ask Nvidia to pull their titles from the service. In 2021, the biggest question about Geforce Now is, what's left to play? My name's Not Important, and I'm here to tell you the Unlike the more seamless user experience of Google Stadia, you can't actually buy games through the Geforce Now app, and none are included on either the standard free service or the premium subscription. If you already have a large catalogue of games on Steam, Epic, etc., and who doesn't, you may find only a fraction of them are actually supported in Geforce Now. Nvidia themselves have a complete list of all supported games, but it's a pretty stark and unengaging presentation, so I'm here to help you work out what the best games available are before you go wasting your money. Be ye forewarned, although as usual my list is aggregated from critic scores, I have interjected my own take on whether these particular games are a good fit for a streaming platform, and whether or not they can deliver a playable experience on, say, a smartphone. With all that said, let's look at the top 10. I wanted to throw this one in, not because I'm a massive fanboy of the game, but I am a massive fanboy of the game. And not because it just missed out on the spot in the list, because it really didn't. No, I wanted to include Cyberpunk 2077, as it so happens that the game that's unofficially kicked off the next generation really needs a next generation machine to power it, and until 9th generation consoles become more available, streaming services like Geforce Now and Google Stadia are among the best ways to enjoy it. Gothic, quirky and darkly cute may be an accurate description of your crush in the early 2000s, but it also encapsulates the visual style of Hollow Knight, a side-scrolling hack-and-slash platformer in the mould of Castlevania. As is customary for the genre, gameplay involves evolving your character's abilities in order to explore the labyrinthine map, defeating enemies as you go. It's become something of a cliché to compare difficult games featuring timing-based melee combat encounters with a certain fantasy medieval game series originating in Japan, but in this case it's a reasonably fair analogy. Given this focus on split-second timing, then it's advisable to make sure you play this over a strong internet connection, unless you have your device insured against accidental damage. Hollow Knight has an overall critic score of 88.5. With a story and visual theme that looks like a Pacific Rim tie-in made in the early 90s, this tactical turn-based strategy fulfills a number of indie game tropes. Pixel art graphics? Check. Re-establishing obsolete genres? Also check. Despite this, Into the Breach manages to be a rather unique game in the modern context. You're given control over 3 mechs, each with their own pilot, and tasked with saving human cities from invading monsters. Should you fail, a single mech of your choice can be sent back in time to replay the mission, retaining any individual upgrades they've earned. Into the Breach isn't a long drawn-out game like some on this list. Battles can be measured in minutes rather than hours, lending it quite nicely to playing on your lunch break or between classes. Into the Breach won a number of video game awards in 2018 and 2019, and earned a collective score of 89. This odd concoction of a roguelike dungeon crawler and card game seems rather popular with critics. After choosing your character from one of the available archetypes, you progress up one of the aforementioned spires, engaging in turn-based card battles as you go. The roguelike aspect of the game means each run is procedurally generated, and death means starting from scratch, so there's a considerable amount of strategy involved. As a single-player game that doesn't rely on Twitch timing and that has a UI that isn't particularly small or hard to read, there aren't any notable caveats to playing Slay the Spire over Geforce Now. However, it is also available on iOS and doesn't have particularly high system requirements on PC, so you have options if you'd rather play natively on your chosen device. Critics have given Slay the Spire an aggregate score of 89. If someone my age ever points to games like Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment or Fallout and says, "They don't make them like this anymore," we're probably high or drunk or something. Just call us an Uber and make sure we get home okay. Many of the developers behind those classic isometric RPGs of the 90s and 2000s felt like there was still more to be done with the genre. Playing very much like you'd expect from a contemporary update to the classic formula, Pillars of Eternity doesn't stray far from the point-and-click RPG style. While perhaps not as memorable as its forebears, Pillars of Eternity is certainly a fun time for fans of the original games and for newcomers alike. One minor quirk specific to its use on Geforce Now, the game relies on mouse and keyboard control and as such can't be played on phones. Pillars of Eternity holds an aggregate score across Metacritic and OpenCritic of 89. On paper, Dead Cells might not seem all that different from Hollow Knight, what with it also being a side-scrolling platform Metroidvania with a Retroid aesthetic and healthy dose of gallows humour. Its gameplay does enough to distinguish itself. The story's premise, that you are a mass of cells hijacking a convenient corpse in order to attempt a prison break, only to die and begin again, is a sort of medieval Edge of Tomorrow via Earthworm Jim. Less focused on exploration and more on rapid combat, the environment in Dead Cells is procedurally generated and means that each run-through is subtly different. The main driving force is obtaining blueprints and weapon upgrades to help facilitate your next run. These features combine to make for a compelling, addictive experience that seldom feels frustrating. I've been criticised in the past for being unduly harsh on streaming services, but I feel I'd be remiss in my duties if I didn't point out that this game doesn't require a particularly high-spec PC, and is also available to buy and download on the App Store and Google Play. Dead Cells is one of my personal favourites on this list, and holds a combined score of 89. I'd like to just quickly thank everyone for helping me pass 300 subscribers recently. If you've been enjoying my videos, consider joining them and hitting the bell to see my latest content when it drops. Cheers! Farming simulators aren't a new phenomenon. In fact, this genre is big enough to encapsulate several distinct styles of gameplay, from the hyper-real to the gamified. Stardew Valley won't be mistaken for Farming Simulator 2020 anytime soon, instead offering a charming, cartoonish quasi-RPG experience in which you get to know your neighbours, explore the local area and grow and harvest crops. The developer was heavily inspired by early Harvest Moon games, and in creating Stardew Valley, made what he intended to be a return to the roots of that series. Again, sorry to seem like I'm knocking the service, but I have to point out that you can buy and download a version of Stardew Valley for mobile, which might make more sense if you want to play this game on a phone but don't necessarily want to stream it over the internet. Stardew Valley and its ilk are proving particularly popular during lockdown, so if you're pining for a more light-hearted take on gaming, you probably don't need much convincing, but critics have scored Stardew Valley an aggregate of 89.5. In what's hardly a new turn of events for developer Valve, the practice of hiring within the modding scene turned out an esports blockbuster. No, I'm not talking about Counter-Strike or Team Fortress. This time, the team behind Warcraft 3 mod Defense of the Ancients were brought in to produce the standalone game Dota 2, released by Valve in 2013. In the same vein as its precursors like Dota and League of Legends, Dota 2 is a fantasy-themed multiplayer online battle arena, or MOBA. Viewed from a 2.5D isometric perspective, teams of up to 5 players compete to destroy one another's bases, sort of like if one were to make Team Fortress 2 or Overwatch, but as an RTS. Dota 2 works particularly well as a streaming game because, well, it's already free to play. Signing up to Geforce Now as a new gamer is likely to be pretty daunting for some, so having big name games like Dota 2, Apex Legends and Fortnite to try out is going to help reduce some of that anxiety. As a game designed primarily for competitive play, it is arguable that playing over a streaming platform might well introduce some additional latency, and once again, owing to the need for mouse and keyboard controls, this one is strictly for PC only. Dota 2 is one of the most popular online games in the world, so it's unusual that critics would review it as well as they have. However, it's proven a surprising critical darling, no doubt partly down to that Valve magic. Dota 2 holds a critic score of 90.5. RPGs come in many flavours, but few honour the traditions of the pre-video game era role-playing game like Disco Elysium. An adaptation of a tabletop game of the same name, you take an isometric view of a bleak, contemporary adjacent fantasy world that doesn't dwell on conventional fantasy or sci-fi tropes. You don't get to roll a character, as the story scenario and your role in that story are predefined. You play as an amnesiac police detective named Harry, attempting to piece together his identity, having lost his memory after an extended period of substance abuse, while simultaneously solving a murder. Beyond that outline, your character's personality can be determined by your actions in the game. Your choices in action and dialogue can steer your character down a number of paths. You may choose to be pompous or bigoted or nihilistic, or one of a myriad other character traits depending on the ideas and beliefs you choose for your character to hold. Gameplay is mostly based around conversations, and events in-game are determined by your actions, conversation choices and statistics. As such, there isn't any combat in a traditional sense. With its heavy, introspective story and unconventional style, this may not be for everyone, and once again, this one's for PC players only, though its text-heavy style wouldn't be a good fit on phones anyway. But if you're open to a unique experience, Disco Elysium can certainly deliver one. The aggregate score across OpenCritic and Metacritic is 91.5. Not for the first time on this list, we see a game inspired by the classic RPGs of the late 90s and early 2000s prove to be a hit with the critics. Divinity: Original Sin 2 is a modern take on the isometric party-based RPGs of the past, with a more versatile camera and modern 3D engine that makes it less of an homage in the style of Pillars of Eternity and more of a spiritual successor to these games. Starting with your choice of a pre-rolled or customised character, you progress through the game's wonderfully realised world and follow the dramatic fantasy story, either alone or in co-op, as well as taking in the side quests that you either come across in the world, or which act as a backstory for members of your party. Gameplay is less prescribed than with many other RPGs, with less in the way of quest markers or specific instructions. Divinity doesn't hold your hand through quests, allowing you to approach most problems from different angles depending on your preference. With the release of the Definitive Edition, developers Larian have not just revamped the visuals and story elements, but crucially made the game more suited to playing via controller, making it a better fit for mobile gaming than you might otherwise think a complex RPG would be. Critics have showered Divinity: Original Sin 2 Definitive Edition with praise since its release in 2019, with an overall score of 92, placing it narrowly in second place on this list. Developers CD Projekt Red might not have done much good to their public image this last few months, but let's not forget exactly how that image was formed. The Witcher 3 is a third-person action RPG in which you play the titular Witcher, Geralt of Rivia, questing across the continent in order to find your missing ward Ciri. The Witcher 3 is notorious for its side quests, so despite this fairly simple premise, it's easy to lose yourself in 100 smaller stories, burying you in the game's lore. While, as the name suggests, The Witcher 3 was preceded by two well-regarded and modestly successful games in the same genre, it was this entry in the series that caught the public's imagination. Its combination of engrossing storytelling, moral ambiguity and vast open world were unparalleled at the time of release, and hold up astonishingly well today. On the subject of holding up, despite being almost 5 years old, The Witcher 3's visuals and art style are still sublime. Though this is an 8th generation console title, it keeps the tradition of CDPR games of having bonus graphical features, especially for the PC version, and as you're effectively playing the game on a high-end PC, you'll get access to all these additional features. Players on mobile will get a smoother, better-looking experience than the Switch version, though the smaller screen may offset this advantage somewhat. Players on lower-end desktops, laptops and Android TV boxes will get to enjoy a better overall experience than console players, though with the usual caveats of game streaming. The Witcher 3 is a game I've covered many times in the course of charting the top 10 games across various platforms, and is generally considered by critics to be among the best games of the modern era. It comes as no surprise then that it tops our list with a combined OpenCritic and Metacritic score of 92.5. I'm working on my next video about streaming services, look out for that in the next few weeks. I'm looking forward to reading your opinions on game streaming in general, and Geforce Now in particular in the comments. Again, a massive thank you to me for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check out my channel if you're into PCs. Kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.